The knock came at 6:04 a.m., hard enough to rattle the cheap print of a lighthouse on our hallway wall. My daughter, Maya, was already dressed for her university lab, a piece of toast halfway to her mouth. The two detectives who filled our doorway didn't look at the toast. They just looked at her. "Maya Jensen?" one asked. My voice was thick with sleep. "What is this?" The senior officer wouldn't meet my eyes. He just read from a paper, his voice flat. "You are under arrest in connection with." He paused, cleared his throat, and just said, "Violation of Statute 44B. The file is sealed by a district judge." My stomach turned to ice. They cuffed her right there, by the coat rack. She just stood silent, her face pale, her eyes fixed on the floor. She wouldn't look at me. She wouldn't say a word. As they put her in the car, I realized my daughter was being taken for a crime so unspeakable, they couldn't even name it in her own home. The precinct smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant, a combination that felt like the official scent of despair. I sat on a hard plastic chair for 3 hours before they let me see her, and even then, it was through a smudged pane of glass in a holding room. "Maya," I pleaded, pressing my hand to the glass. "Honey, just talk to me. What is this? What is Statute 44B? I can't help you if you don't tell me." She just sat on the metal bench, her hands in her lap. She looked up, and her eyes, they weren't scared. That was the worst part. They were resolved. It was a look I'd never seen, a cold hardness that didn't belong to my daughter. "Dad," she said, her voice a dry rasp, "you can't. Just go home. Please. Go home." My voice cracked, echoing slightly in the sterile room. "Your lawyer, the one the state gave you." He just shrugged at me. He said the file is sealed, not just from the public, but from me. I was losing my composure, and I could see the guard by the door tense. I lowered my voice, my throat tight. "Maya, the whispers out there, they're implying things. Things I know you aren't. But your silence, it's making them think it's true." She flinched, a tiny, almost invisible reaction. "It's better this way," she whispered, and then looked away, back at the concrete wall. My visiting time was over. As I walked out, the arresting detective stopped me. "Mr. Jensen," he said, his voice low, "I'd stop asking questions about 44B if I were you. Some things aren't just unspeakable. They're untouchable." He wasn't threatening me. He was warning me. But as I reached my car, I saw a small, folded note tucked under my windshield wiper. It wasn't from Maya. It had just 2 words: "Find Alistair." Alistair. The name felt foreign, heavy. It wasn't a friend I recognized, not a professor she'd ever mentioned. It was a blank wall, and it was the only thing I had. I drove home, the small note burning a hole in my pocket. The house was appallingly quiet. Her uneaten toast was still on the kitchen counter, a mocking monument to our last normal moment. I couldn't sit still. I went to her room, feeling like a trespasser, and found her university ID on her desk. That's where I had to go. The life sciences building was buzzing with students, all of them blissfully unaware that my world had just imploded. I found her assigned lab station, a chaotic, brilliant mess of beakers and coded notes. A young woman with tired eyes and a faded Curiosity t-shirt was slowly packing Maya's personal items into a cardboard box. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, her voice wary. "I'm Maya's father," I said, my own voice hoarse. She's been arrested." The woman's hands froze over a notebook. Her eyes darted to the door, then back to me. She knew. She absolutely knew something. I held out the crumpled note. "Please. I have to know. Who is Alistair?" Her face went pale. She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong, and pulled me into an empty stairwell. The heavy fire door hissed shut, cloaking us in silence. "Oh God," she whispered, her eyes wide with a fear that perfectly mirrored my own. Alistair isn't a who, Mr. Jensen. It's a what. It's Project Alistair. It's the research her professor, Dr. Vale, claimed as his own. The research Maya was going to expose. My knees felt weak, and I gripped the stairwell railing. Expose him? Dr. Vale. The name tasted like ash. This wasn't some faceless enemy. Marcus Vale had been to our house. He'd praised Maya's brilliance over my wife's casserole, calling her the most promising protégé he'd ever had. The man had smiled at me, all while planning to destroy my daughter. The lab partner, Chloe, saw the sick understanding on my face and nodded. Vale was burying her name, Mr. Jensen. He was going to publish Project Alistair as his own. It's a breakthrough in cellular regeneration. But Maya found something else. An anomaly. A risk. It wasn't ready. So he had her arrested? I whispered, the pieces clicking together with horrifying speed. He used a sealed file to what? Accuse her of stealing his work. Worse, Chloe said, her voice dropping. He's accusing her of sabotage. He's telling the university and the DoD, their funders, that she tried to weaponize the research. Statute 44B, it's a domestic terror clause. It's why no one will talk. It's why the file is sealed. He's painting her as a traitor. I felt the blood drain from my face. This was why she was silent. She wasn't just protecting her work. She was being framed for a crime against her own country. He won't get away with this, I said, my voice shaking with a new, cold rage. Where is he? Chloe pulled out her phone. That's the worst part. He's arrogant. He's the keynote speaker at the Chancellor's Symposium tonight. He's presenting Alistair, her work, right now. She pressed the phone into my hand, opening a locked folder. Maya knew this might happen. She backed up everything. The real data. His threats. It's all here, locked behind a passphrase. She told me if anything happened, only you would know the answer to the clue. The lighthouse. My breath hitched. The lighthouse. It wasn't the cheap print in the hallway, the one the detectives had rattled. It was our place. A tiny, broken-down diner on the coast, named the Lighthouse, where I'd taken Maya for pancakes every Saturday after her mother passed. It was our sanctuary. I looked at the phone, my fingers clumsy. The clue wasn't a word, it was a date. The date of our first visit, the day I promised her we'd be okay. I typed it in, October 23rd, '08. The phone clicked open. A single folder dominated the screen, Project Alistair. Chloe and I huddled in the stairwell, scrolling through files. It was all there. Emails, voice memos, hidden video logs. We saw Dr. Vale, his voice smooth and paternal, first praising Maya's breakthrough, then dismissing her concerns, and finally, threatening her academic career if she interfered. But it was the last file that made Chloe gasp and grab my arm. It was Maya's final simulation. The anomaly she'd found. The cellular regeneration formula worked, but it didn't stop. In the simulation, the regenerated tissue became cancerous, aggressive, spreading with terrifying speed. Vale wasn't just stealing credit for a miracle cure. He was knowingly burying proof that he'd created a plague. He was about to present a weapon of mass destruction as a gift to humanity, all for fame and a government grant. I looked at the clock on the wall. 7:15 p.m. The symposium had already started. He's on stage right now, I said, the cold rage solidifying into a terrible, clear purpose. He's lying to all of them. Chloe looked at me, her face sheet white. We can send this to the press. I shook my head, pocketing the phone. That's not fast enough. He has to be stopped now, while he's still holding the microphone. We didn't run. We walked, a terrible, focused calm settling over us. The Chancellor's Symposium was in the main auditorium, its glass doors gleaming, flanked by two private security guards in sharp black suits. They weren't checking IDs. They were just watching, an imposing human wall. "Mr. Jensen, they'll never let us in," Chloe whispered, her hand shaking. "He's the guest of honor." I looked through the glass. The hall was packed, standing room only. And on the distant stage, bathed in a warm, arrogant spotlight, was Dr. Vale. I could hear his voice, smooth and amplified, echoing even out here. "He won't stop me," I said, my voice low. I pushed open the door. One of the guards put a hand on my chest. "Sir, this is a private event." I didn't look at him. I looked past him, my eyes fixed on the stage. "That man," I said, my voice shaking with a rage that must have looked like grief. "He was my daughter's mentor. She was arrested this morning. I need to hear what he's saying." The guard's expression softened, just a fraction. "He saw a broken father. You can stand in the back, sir. But you have to be silent." We slipped into the darkness. Vale was in his element. A massive screen behind him showed glowing cellular structures. "And so we stand on the precipice," he boomed. "A future where Project Alistair doesn't just heal, it rebuilds." The audience was captivated, hanging on every word. He saw me then. His eyes scanned the back row and found mine. He knew me. He didn't falter, but a tiny, cruel smirk played on his lips. He was untouchable. He was winning. "I can't get to the stage," I whispered to Chloe. "He's got everyone convinced." "You don't have to," she whispered back, her eyes gleaming in the dark. "He's using the university's public Wi-Fi for his presentation. He's just mirroring his laptop." Her fingers were already flying across Maya's phone. "He's arrogant. He never even secured the connection." Dr. Vale was gesturing to a slide showing healthy, dividing cells. "A future without loss," he was saying, his voice resonating with false hope. "A future where the word incurable is finally." Chloe didn't look up from Maya's phone. "I'm in," she breathed, her voice trembling with adrenaline. "I have access to the display queue." My heart was a drum against my ribs. "Don't show him the emails," I said, my voice urgent. "He'll just deny them. He'll say they're fabricated. Show them the anomaly. Show them the final simulation." Chloe's eyes met mine. They weren't a student's eyes anymore. They were a soldier's. She nodded. "Uploading the video file now. It'll override his current slide." On stage, Vale was building to his finale. "The applications are limitless. The backing from our government partners is secured. The future is." He never finished the sentence. The massive screen behind him flickered. His beautiful, glowing cells vanished. They were replaced by Maya's final simulation. The auditorium went silent. The video was raw, unlabeled, but its horror was universal. They watched healthy tissue metastasize. They watched the cure become a black, creeping tide of cancerous cells, consuming the entire simulation in seconds. A collective gasp, sharp and loud, sucked the air from the room. Vale froze. He stared at the screen, his face a mask of confusion, then dawning, sickening terror. He fumbled with his laptop, trying to close the window, but the feed was hijacked. It wouldn't stop. "You!" he roared, finally spotting me in the darkness, his voice cracking over the microphone. "Security. Get him." But I was already walking. I wasn't running. I was walking down the center aisle, and the room was so quiet all they could hear were my footsteps on the carpet. I stepped into the light at the foot of the stage, my voice carrying in the stunned silence. "That," I said, pointing to the screen, "is the real Project Alistair. That is the anomaly he told my daughter to bury." The two security guards were closing in on me now. I didn't care. I looked at the chancellor in the front row. And that is why he had my daughter, Maya Jensen, arrested this morning under Statute 44B. He wasn't protecting his research. He was silencing his only witness. The two guards grabbed my arms, their grips like iron. But I didn't struggle. I didn't even flinch. I just stared at Vale, who was now trapped in the blinding white spotlight, his face a grotesque mask of rage and panic. "He's lying," he shrieked into the microphone, his polished voice gone, replaced by a shrill, ugly sound. "This is fabricated data. A disgruntled, failed student. Treason." He was still fumbling with his laptop, but the simulation of the cancerous cells just kept looping, a relentless, silent accusation on the giant screen above his head. The audience was frozen, a sea of pale, horrified faces. "Stop!" The word cut through the auditorium like a surgeon's blade. It was the chancellor. She was on her feet in the front row, her face as hard as marble. She looked at the two guards who were pinning my arms. "Let him go." They released me instantly, as if my coat had suddenly caught fire. They looked confused, their eyes darting between the Chancellor and Dr. Vale. The Chancellor took the 3 steps up to the stage, moving with a cold, precise fury. "Dr. Vale," she said, her voice dangerously quiet, "you have made a catastrophic error in judgment." "He's the one," Vale sputtered, pointing at me. "He assaulted your symposium." "Chloe," I called out, my voice hoarse. Chloe was already walking down the aisle, Maya's phone held up like a torch. "We have everything, Madam Chancellor," Chloe said, her voice shaking but clear. "We have his emails. We have his voice memos threatening her. We have her original, time-stamped research." That was it. Bill saw it in her eyes. He saw the end. He didn't say another word. He bolted. He shoved past the Chancellor, leaped off the side of the stage, and ran for a side exit. He never made it. The same 2 security guards, now understanding their real duty, tackled him before he'd taken 5 steps. It wasn't a gentle arrest. It was a solid, definitive thud as he hit the ornate carpet. As they wrestled to cuff him, I watched the Chancellor take Maya's phone from Chloe. She looked at the data, then at the pathetic, struggling man on the floor, and finally, at me. Her face was grim. "Mr. Jensen," she said, "it seems we have all been complicit in a terrible, unspeakable injustice." I didn't wait for an escort. The Chancellor's driver got us to the precinct in under 10 minutes, the car's tires screeching at the curb. I strode back into that same sterile lobby, but this time I wasn't a grieving, confused father. I was an avenger. The Chancellor was at my side, her face a mask of cold fury, and Chloe was right behind us, still holding Maya's phone like a shield. The desk sergeant looked up, his face hardening in recognition. "Sir, I told you, visiting hours are." "I am not visiting." The Chancellor's voice cut through the room, sharp and absolute. "I am here for Maya Jensen. You are releasing her now." The detective who had warned me about untouchable things emerged from the back office, his eyes widening in disbelief when he saw the Chancellor. "Ma'am, with all due respect, this is an active 44B investigation. That file is sealed by a federal judge." That file, the Chancellor snapped, was sealed based on perjured testimony from Dr. Marcus Vale, who is currently in the custody of university police for academic fraud, reckless endangerment, and filing a false report. The unspeakable crime was his, not hers. "You have exactly 1 minute to open that cell, or the next call I make is to the Attorney General." The detective's face went white. He made one frantic call, his voice a low, panicked murmur. A moment later, the electronic lock on the holding corridor buzzed, a sound so loud it seemed to shake the building. And then, she was there. Maya walked out, her steps slow, her shoulders slumped. She saw me. Her eyes, which had been so hard and resolved, suddenly fractured with a terrible, confused vulnerability. She saw Chloe, and a flash of fear crossed her face. Fear for Chloe. I didn't wait. I didn't care about the police or the chancellor. I crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her against my chest, my hand going to the back of her head, just like I did when she was 6. She was stiff for a second, a rigid line of shock, and then she just collapsed. She didn't make a sound, but her hands gripped the back of my jacket, her knuckles white. "It's over," I whispered into her hair. "I know. It's all over. You're safe." She pulled back, just enough to look at me, her eyes searching mine, not daring to believe it. "Dad?" she whispered, her voice raw. What did you do?" Before I could answer, a flashbulb erupted from outside the precinct's glass doors. And then another. And another. The Unspeakable case was now the only thing anyone in the city would be talking about. The flashbulbs were a blinding, chaotic storm. We pushed through them, the Chancellor shielding Maya, me pulling her close, a phalanx of truth cutting through the lies. The story exploded. "Traitor DOC frames student," one headline screamed. "The Alistair anomaly. Cure or curse," blared another. Dr. Vale's trial was swift. Faced with Maya's immutable data, Chloe's testimony, and the panicked confessions of his corporate funders, he was convicted on all counts. The Unspeakable Statute 44B was thrown out, a stain of corruption exposed to the light. Project Alistair was immediately seized, its catastrophic potential now a subject of intense ethical review, led by a panel that insisted on Maya's direct oversight. 6 months later, the cameras were gone. We sat in a familiar booth at the lighthouse. The bell above the door tinkled, and the smell of old coffee and frying bacon felt like a homecoming. Maya was sipping a milkshake, the shadows finally gone from her eyes. She had her own research lab now, funded by a grant for ethical science, with Chloe as her lead partner. "You know," she said quietly, swirling her straw, "I was silent because I was trying to protect the research. But I was trying to protect you. I knew Vale. I knew what he was capable of, and I was terrified he would come after you next." I put down my coffee cup, my hand covering hers on the worn Formica table. The Unspeakable case. I finally understood. It wasn't the crime that was unspeakable. It was her integrity. It was the depth of her courage, a strength so profound it didn't need words. I thought I had to save her from the lie. But the truth was, she'd been strong enough to carry the truth, and me, all along. "You don't ever have to protect me, Maya," I said, my voice thick. "But I have never, ever been more proud to be your father." Her hand turned over and gripped mine, her smile finally, truly, reaching her eyes.